Coming up on a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, Memphis found a way to win in San Antonio. Big bucket at the buzzer, or close to the buzzer, from Jaren Jackson Jr. Scotty Pippen Jr. looked pretty impressive in that game as well. I'm going to talk about what he brings to the Grizzlies beyond this season, and we will preview Memphis in Denver tonight to take on the Nuggets. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Lock in with me.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Hello, hello, hello. It is I, Joe Mullinax, flying solo on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. My co-host, Michael Cole, very busy covering the NCAA tournament there in Memphis, Tennessee, helping out his publisher, his employer, the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis. And who better to help with college basketball coverage than an award-winning writer like Michael Cole, am I right? But never fret, dear listener, dear viewer, he'll be back with you on tomorrow's episode. Again, if you're an everydayer here at Locked On Grizzlies, you check the start time for Grizzlies Nuggets tonight, and you know that Joe Mullinax, myself, I am old and washed, and I am not going to make it all the way up to the end of that game. So even though it's a little bit earlier than it has been, still going to be nice and comfy, cozy, like a cinnamon bun in my bed by the time that game concludes. Michael will have you on the Tuesday episode, and you've got me on this Monday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. So happy to have you with me on this show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. We here at Locked On Grizzlies are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, literally anywhere you get a podcast. You can check us out, like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Again, hopefully you are an everydayer at this point. You're checking out the show every time an episode drops, just about every day in season. If not, this is your first time coming through. You check us out every once in a while. Hopefully you'll come back again and again and again, whether it's myself, to Michael, or both of us combined here on Locked On Grizzlies. This Monday, another start of the week here, we are going to take a look at what happened Friday. And when I previewed the game against the Spurs, I, again, will continue my vibe, spoiler alert, when we talk about the Nuggets later in the show. What the team themselves are doing matters more than the opponent at this point. Like Victor Wembanyama having 30-plus points, 16 or so rebounds. Yeah, he's going to be a massive problem, not just for the Memphis Grizzlies, but for everybody moving forward. The Spurs, sooner rather than later, it appears, are going to be a threat once again because Victor Wembanyama is under their employ, right? That's just the reality. Memphis will worry about that another day. Right now, they are trying to figure out who fits with them long-term, who they can move on from, who can stay on a two-way contract, who needs to be converted to a full roster spot, who might be available via trade. They are collecting data on just about everybody on the roster. One guy that they're not collecting data on, of course, is Jaren Jackson Jr., because they know Jaren Jackson Jr. can ball. And Jaren scored 28 points against the Spurs, 28 of Memphis's 99, including the game-winning bucket with about a second or so to go. Also grabbed 7 rebounds, also had 2 blocks, 2 assists. A pretty impressive all-around game for Jaren. Could have shot better from 3, but he was effective and efficient in and around the bucket inside the three-point line. He was one of the best players on the floor. Again, you tip your cap to Wembanyama. 3 blocks, 5 assists. He's a really special talent, but he shot 12 threes. And when you have the size and length of Wembanyama and you are not taking advantage of it at and around the rim, Memphis will live with him shooting threes. If Victor Wembanyama becomes a 40% or so three-point shooter consistently, like for an entire season, he's going to be unguardable. You will live with him taking about half of his shots, almost exactly half of his shots from 3. You'll live with that. You will not live with him eating you alive in and around the paint, and that's basically what happened when he did go inside. He was 8 for 12 on his 2-point attempts. So again, by all means, Wemby, hang out on the perimeter if you so choose. The rest of the Spurs, Devin Vassell, he's really impressive player. He had a good showing. Those are probably their 2 cornerstone guys moving forward. Just about everybody else can be moved on from. For Memphis, again, the Spurs weren't as important as the Grizzlies are. And Jaren had a good showing. Santi Aldama, 15 points, 13 rebounds. That 13 rebounds is a big number because obviously we'll talk about this over the next couple of shows. Brandon Clark, and we'll talk about it in the Denver Nuggets preview later in the show. Brandon Clark has been upgraded to doubtful. And again, if you've been following the Memphis Grizzlies and how they do their injury reports, Brandon Clark no longer just being out, him now being doubtful. He probably will not play against Denver. He probably will play against the Lakers on Wednesday. So maybe Santi's starting to see the shadow of Brandon Clark coming back around, and he's thinking, I need to pick things up. It was a good showing for him. That double-double was nice. Last show, I talked about G.G. Jackson not being eligible for the all-rookie team, and I was mistaken. Shout out to Cam, old Grizzlies OG, Cam, who I've known covering the Grizzlies and following the Grizzlies for a long time. He pointed out, and I honestly did not know this, right? That's one of the rare things in our discourse nowadays. People just openly admitting I was unsure. G.G. Jackson is eligible for the all-rookie team. There is no game requirement for Sixth Man of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and the all-rookie team, which I find fascinating personally. That might be a good topic for a future episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I get it, but I don't get it, right? I understand the logic, but I just always assumed it would be a wholesale change of the NBA awards. But anyway, I digress. So G.G. is eligible, but G.G. did not look particularly good in this game. He did some things well, 3 assists. We've been asking for more facilitation, so he did well in that regard. 8 rebounds. You want to continue to see him rebound out of that 3 position if that is somewhere where maybe he can start going into next season, theoretically. But the thing that they need the most from GG is buckets, and 5 for 16, 14 points on 16 shots. I think last week I talked about how the Grizzlies have been looking for a wing that can play and play at a really high level since Rudy Gay, right? 14 points on 16 shots. Those of you that have been around the Grizzlies for a while, like me, that's a Rudy Gay line. That's a line that you look at and you're like, ugh, that's not the most efficient offensive basketball. I'm not super stoked about that. Now, major difference, Rudy Gay was not a 19-year-old rookie, and I continue to be willing to invest in GG. He should start the rest of the way. He should be in the conversation going into next year. All of those things remain true. But that inconsistency is one of the reasons I think on our last episode I reminded everyone, don't forget Marcus Smart, right? Don't forget Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart can help winning even when his shots are not going in. G.G. Jackson had the lowest single game plus minus for Memphis in that 2-point contest. G.G. in 37 minutes played was a minus 15. He was a minus 15. So the Grizzlies were that much better in the 11 minutes that G.G. was not on the floor. And he's going to have off nights. The larger sample size is what matters, as we'll continue to discuss. And then needing, in my opinion, to put together a string of games where he is that scorer as a starter. We've seen him do it as a reserve, and that's one of the things I'm most excited about with Gigi, is him as a reserve getting those buckets off the bench. He needs consecutive games, numerous examples as he starts, and he's had some solid performances, don't get me wrong. But as the sample size gets bigger, you would rather not see these 5 for 16 kind of shooting games. So again, people are going to get in the comments and say I'm hating on GG. No, I want to see more. Like I want GG to start against the Denver Nuggets. I want him to start against the Lakers on Wednesday. I want to keep building that sample so they have as much data as possible to compare GG the reserve to GG the starter. And Marcus Smart, in my opinion, we'll talk more about it very much in that conversation. We've barely talked about Vince Williams Jr. because of his own injury issues. Obviously, we'll talk more about Vince as well. But it was a good win for the Grizzlies. Obviously, there were some tanking vibes. I think they gave up a 6-point lead in what seemed like 30 seconds or maybe in a little bit less than that. But Memphis found a way to win. Jaren Jackson Jr., the best, most experienced, is probably the fairest way to put it, player on the floor in the game, and that's shown through late. And it was good to see the Grizzlies have success with Jaren on the floor, finding a way to win against a team in a similar boat to them. Spurs aren't actively trying to do much this season. The Grizzlies have obviously had the year they've had. To go in there with San Antonio, compete, not having your full slate of players. Desmond Bane didn't play in that game, for example, sat that one out. So it was good to see Jaren lead the way. It was good to see strong Santi showing. And Scotty Pippen Jr. was also pretty impressive in the game. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about DeMichael Cole's boy, Scotty Pippen Jr., and what he brings to Memphis long-term. Because, again, That is what the focus is. Not what Scottie Pippen did against the Spurs. He had a good game. But what can Scotty Pippen Jr. do long-term for these Grizzlies? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from one retirement account or other retirement accounts, with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscriptions fees apply. Now for some legal information. Claim is as of Q1 2024, validated by the Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to United States customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member of SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die whip alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die whip alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to United States customers. eBay, go check them out today. Scotty Pippen Jr., an extremely impressive showing against the Spurs, and he's had some solid games throughout this year. But again, against San Antonio, coming off the bench in 3 minutes of play, 18 points on 9 shots. That's some efficient scoring. 2 of 2 from beyond the arc, and he scored that way without hitting his free throws. He was 4 for 8 from the charity stripe. He just makes a couple more of those, and the numbers look even better. 3 assists, 4 steals with Scotty Pippen Jr. We'll talk more about that here in a moment. 3 rebounds, a plus 11 for the game. Only guys like Jake LaRavia, John Conchar had better plus minuses in the contest against San Antonio. Scotty Pippen Jr. is someone that my partner, DeMichael Cole, of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, he's been beating the drum for Scotty Pippen Jr. He's talked about him as a long-term piece. And it's not that I didn't see it, because I did. I see the skill. I see the scoring acumen. DeMichael's talked about that a ton. So it's not that I didn't see it. It's eventually the roster crunch gets so tight that somebody has to be squeezed out, right? And you can't say this guy's awesome and that guy's amazing and they have to keep him. They only have 18 roster spots, right? The 15 NBA full-time roster spots and then 3 two-ways. So somebody's got to go, right? There are guys that fans love that are not going to be on this roster next year, not because they're bad at basketball, but because the Grizzlies have made the determination, whether it is contract investment, draft capital, a trade, free agency, whatever the case might be, somebody's going to be worth more in terms of basketball business than somebody else. So I always kind of push Scotty Pippen Jr. off to the side as someone that was part of the injure culture, if that makes sense. He's here because the Grizzlies got banged up, and he's not going to be part of the picture too much long-term. I'm starting to see DeMichael's vision now, and the San Antonio game was a great example of that. But it was just a part of a larger sample size, and that is what I really want to focus on with you with talking about Scotty Pippen Jr., because Scotty Pippen Jr., in terms of assist percentage, okay, so the percentage of teammates made shots coming off of Scotty Pippen Jr. assists, it's only 223 minutes of play. That's a small sample size. That sample will keep growing beyond his 10 games played the rest of the season. 34.3% for Scotty Pippen Jr. That has him 87th percentile. Very, very, very good among NBA point guards. Assist to usage rate, 1.44. very, very, very good among NBA point guards. Now, he's no Tyus Jones. His turnover percentage is 17.4 going into the night, and that's really bad, right? That's 7th percentile according to Cleaning the Glass. But he scores the ball effectively. When he's given the opportunity, points per shot attempt, 120.9 every 100 shot attempts. That is 82nd percentile. Again, very, very, very good. Above average for the NBA overall among point guards. And it's not just his scoring. Block percentage, 1.2% for a point guard. That is 93rd percentile. Steal percentage, 98th percentile, 2.8%. Those stocks that the Grizzlies and Taylor Jenkins, the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, have valued since Jenkins got here. Scotty Pippen Jr. thrives in those situations because what can those steals and blocks lead to? Turnovers. And those turnovers can lead to transition opportunities, which Memphis thrives in. Again, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Foul percentage is way too high. He's one of the highest foulers at the point guard position in the NBA right now. 4.9% per team play of the plays are fouls on Scotty Pippen Jr. That's too high. But even in his rebounding, he's above average as a defensive rebounder, and he is very above average when it comes to being an offensive rebounder. He attacks the glass at a high rate. And again, these numbers aren't necessarily skewed. It's small sample sizes, right? Like he's currently shooting 56% from three. If he shoots 56% from three the rest of his career, he's going to be a max contract guy before he knows it. That number is probably going to go down. But the fact that he can hit those threes, the fact that he does defend at a high level, especially in those stock categories that the Grizzlies hold in such high esteem, that is why I see DeMichael's vision, and that is why I'm at a place now where I think he's going to be here long term. Now, I don't know that that's a roster spot. The two-way contract can obviously carry into next season. And I love the idea of Scotty Pippen Jr. on that two-way contract for the same reason that I've always loved a point guard on that two-way contract. Maybe a bigger one. Scotty Pippen Jr. is 6'1", but that's neither here nor there. He can't play with Ja, but if the team is healthy, Scotty Pippen Jr. is not playing anyway. And I think that is something that we have to come to the realization of as we watch this roster shake out over the next several months. Yeah, Scotty Pippen Jr. belongs in Memphis. I think on a two-way contract, he makes a ton of sense. But if this Grizzlies roster actually gets to some semblance of health, he's spending a majority of his time with the Memphis Hustle and not the Memphis Grizzlies. Again, it's cool that he's playing right now, but the Grizzlies just beat the San Antonio Spurs by 2 points. A game-winning bucket with like a second to go. The Spurs are worse than Memphis this season. So it's not like these numbers that are being put up, whether it's G.G. Jackson, like we talked about on Friday's show, or whether it's Scotty Pippen Jr. right now, they're not always leading to winning basketball or winning in a way that you would assume they could when healthy. If John Morant plays against the Spurs, if Desmond Bane plays against the Spurs, if Brandon Clark plays against the Spurs, that game is not that close if Luke Kennard plays against the Spurs. And you probably do not see Scotty Pippen Jr. in that mix. He belongs in the two-way contract mix. He belongs in the mix of guys. If something happens to Derrick Rose next year and they just buy him out, Scotty Pippen Jr. can slide into that roster spot. And now you've got a third point guard that something happens to Marcus Smart. You need a body that can come and eat reps and minutes and can score and can attack passing lanes and be aggressive in terms of shot creation on the other end. Scotty Pippen Jr. is your guy. So he can play basketball. And I think that if the Derrick Rose scenario, Rose retires because of injuries, whatever the case might be, and that's speculation, I want to stress, no inside information on my part. But say a roster spot comes open like that, Scotty Pippen Jr. sliding in, yeah, I could see that. I see the vision. But we can't make all of these guys rotation players. Because again, John Morant's eventually going to be back. Desmond Bane is back, but he's just, hit or miss in terms of the games he's playing right now. Going into the game against Denver on Monday, tonight. Going into that contest, Desmond Bane, questionable. So Bane is probably going to play. But you still have Luke Kennard out. You still have Derrick Rose out. You still have Marcus Smart out. Those are guys, theoretically speaking, that will be in the mix when the time comes for Memphis to compete again. Scotty Pippen Jr. is probably not in that conversation. but can he be a two-way guy that they call on if they get into a similar boat here and hopefully not miss as many steps as they have this season? Yeah, I think he's shown that he's capable of that through his capacity to score and also create havoc on the defensive end. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to finish up the show previewing Grizzlies-Nuggets. Looking forward to tonight's contest. Could be another winnable game for Memphis. We'll talk about why coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want to remind you that the Locked On Sports 24/7 YouTube channel has a wonderful baseball preview up in case you missed it. Baseball fans, the best Major League Baseball preview is on Locked On Sports Today. You can find it on YouTube, that 24/7 streaming channel, or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. You can get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. So again, find it on Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It was a really cool special. Make sure you're checking it out in case you missed it. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's demon time on Prize Picks. You know how it is. You can win now up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at Prize Picks. Squares are marked with red demons or green goblins, and they get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. On Prize Picks, you can select things like Jaren Jackson Jr., more than 27 points, Anthony Davis, more than 2 blocks, whatever the team, whatever the competition, you're going against the numbers, not against other players. It is a blast to do over at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for the first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It is that easy, and it's fun as well. Make sure you're checking it out. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, finishing out this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, talking Grizzlies-Nuggets. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host for this Monday edition of the show, Joe Mullinax. No to Michael Cole by my side. He is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, the award-winning Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal. Big fan of DeMichael and his work. He's helping out with college basketball coverage. You may have noticed there's a big tournament going on, and I'm currently in the top 6 or so in our bracket challenge. I'm in the top 5-ish, right? I'm in the top 5-ish. Unfortunately, DeMichael's a little bit better than me, and that was one of my challenges, was trying to beat DeMichael. But if you're a member of our bracket group, thank you for joining. I think we had 24, 25 folks sign up. I'm in the top 5-ish. But DeMichael's currently a little bit better, and I had Kentucky making it to the championship. So I'm limited. Hopefully, the vibes will continue to be positive ones moving forward. But we're having fun, and it makes the games a little more interesting doing that bracket challenge. But DeMichael will be with you tomorrow talking Grizzlies Nuggets and other fun things from his weekend experience with college basketball in Memphis, I'm sure. I today am closing out the show looking at that Nuggets game and being intrigued by the injury report. And it's not just the Grizzlies injury report, right? Like Desmond Bane and back soreness. He's questionable, probably going to play the way that the Grizzlies do their injury designations, assuming there's no setback for him. Jake LaRavia has an illness. He's questionable. Lamar Stevens, coming off of that left adductor strain, he may be back. He's questionable going into the contest. Brandon Clark, doubtful. Lines up with our hopes for that Wednesday return. Finally, nice to see him not out. John Conchar, probably out due to right heel soreness, and Vince Williams Jr. probably out. He's doubtful with that left patellar tendonitis still. Still out for Memphis, Luke Kennard for personal reasons. Again, they had a baby, he and his wife, so congratulations to them. John Morant, of course, Derrick Rose, Marcus Smart, Yuta Watanabe, also out for personal reasons, and then Zaire Williams. His reevaluation time, as we've talked about here on Locked On Grizzlies, is coming up soon. But for the Denver Nuggets, they have 2 guys questionable themselves, and I would argue it's their 2 most important players that are questionable, Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. If both of those guys sit, all right, and let's be honest here, dear listener, dear viewer, you and I are friends at this point, right? We've been through some stuff over the last couple of years here on Locked On Grizzlies. We can be honest. If there was a game for Denver to rest some stars, the Grizzlies would probably be it. Because even without Jamal Murray, even without Nikola Jokic, they still have guys like Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. They still have guys that are talented enough to score the basketball and keep the game competitive. Plus, the game is in Denver. You never know. The Grizzlies have had a couple of days off, which is nice to help prepare. But at the altitude, it can be a challenging game for a visiting team, any visiting team, much less one with the depth concerns potentially as the Memphis Grizzlies. So if Jokic and Murray were to sit, obviously that would help Memphis's chances. And I want to stress they're questionable. So it's basically a 50-50 shot whether or not they play. For Memphis, that is not as relevant. Like we've talked about already and we'll continue to talk about going into the last 10 or so games of the season. What matters is what this team is going to do. If John Conchar is indeed out and he's listed as doubtful, like we talked about, who starts in his place? Do you put somebody like a Jake LaRavia, questionable with illness? Bane, obviously, going into that starting lineup would make sense if he plays. But does LaRavia get a sniff if Bane cannot play? Do you put Jordan Goodwin back on the bench, who played 25 minutes against the Spurs? Didn't look particularly good. He's a guy, again, he had 5 rebounds and 5 assists. Cool. Is that a guy that's going to be a part of this thing long-term? Probably not, right? So do you slide him to the bench and maybe give LaRavia an opportunity? Could be interesting to see. How do they address that lineup? That matters. Can Santi Aldama continue the rebounding acumen that he showed? Can Gigi Jackson bounce back as a starter? Because again, the last couple of episodes, people are like, are you sure you're not a Gigi hater? Because you kind of sound like a Gigi hater. I'm not a Gigi hater. I want to keep getting that data to see what he can be as a starter. Because if he could be the starter at 6'9", sign me up. He's an actual wing who probably is a 4 long-term. But right now, he could probably play the 3, especially with the attention to defense that he's brought to the table and his improvement there over these last several weeks. He deserves credit for that. I want to see more of that. I want to see that continue to develop and grow. And if Bane does play, that continued chemistry between himself, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Gigi, that matters a ton. Matters less than what Denver does, to be honest with you. The injury report is significant just because the Nuggets will have less good players potentially on the floor. But Denver, they're kind of coasting to the end here, right? They've got the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Oklahoma City Thunder currently ahead of them in the Western Conference. There's several games in front, roughly, give or take, as we record this, of the Los Angeles Clippers and the other teams behind them. Denver figures to be in that 3-seed-ish mix, right? So they're going to have a first round home series, excuse me. They're the defending champs. They're not necessarily concerned about home court beyond that. The Western Conference is going to be a gauntlet regardless. So you're going to have to go through some pretty good teams, and the Nuggets obviously are one of those pretty good teams. And because of their championship resume, the Nuggets are a team beyond the Timberwolves who don't have that resume, certainly beyond the Thunder, who have played really well this regular season, but don't have that resume that Denver has. The Nuggets are on cruise control these last several weeks. That's one of the reasons I would not be surprised if Jokic and Murray both sit. If it was game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals, they're probably playing no questions asked. But they're playing a Grizzlies team that is relatively banged up, may or may not have Desmond Bane. They're playing a Grizzlies team that even with Jaren Jackson Jr. only beat the Spurs at a last-second almost shot in San Antonio. And again, the game's at elevation. The depth isn't quite there. If I were Denver, I would not be worried about what Memphis is doing. But the good news is, as we've been talking about, the same thing should be true for the Grizzlies. Who cares who plays for the Denver Nuggets? What is Gigi Jackson doing within scheme? Is he continuing his growth as a defender? Is he continuing to find his shots? Is he getting his shots from guys like Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Santi Aldama, guys that figure, barring trade in the case of Santi, to be here next season? How are those things developing and growing? Do they look more comfortable next to each other? How's the chemistry? Are they competing? Are they getting embarrassed? That sort of stuff, developing lineup rotation, comfort with Taylor Jenkins and how he deploys the talent. Those are the things that you're looking for beyond whether or not Murray and Jokic play. If Murray and Jokic play, are the Nuggets more likely to win? Of course. But Denver's already a 14-point favorite with that injury designation for Jokic and Murray being clear. So clearly, the Grizzlies are underdogs regardless of what Denver does. So who cares? Go and play and get that data and see where these guys fit amongst each other, especially the ones that figure to be here long-term. And that includes, even though it might be on a 2-way contract, a guy like a Scotty Pippen Jr. Continue to see him get into the rotation and get off the bench and do some good things on both ends. That's important too. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. I want to once again remind you of our wonderful Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel. Make sure you're checking out first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube for sport content. Make sure you're checking it out on Amazon Fire TV and the free Channels TV app. Really cool to be a part of that. The local Locked On experts, the league shows that we do, Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Make sure you're checking it out. Make sure you're checking out our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. DeMichael Cole will be back. It's going to be great to have him back in the fold. He'll be talking with you about Denver's game against Memphis, how that all played out, who played, who didn't, and he'll look ahead to Brandon Clark's likely return coming up on Wednesday against the Lakers. Until then, and until I see you guys here in a couple of days, I'm Joe Mullinax. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get your podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, literally everywhere. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Have a great rest of your Monday, and we'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies.